What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And on today's episode, I have a very special guest joining me, Shawn Kiernan from the SK Sports Podcast. How you doing today, Shawn?
I'm doing good, Jordan. I appreciate you having me on. How are you?
I'm doing really good. Really excited to have you on here. And there's so much sports stuff that's been released a couple of days, games, and different stuff like that. Really looking forward to the episode. So we'll go ahead and get started here. I know this happened last week, and this happened a couple hours after I posted my episode from last week. But the James Harden trade, him being traded to the Brooklyn Nets. What are your thoughts on Harden being traded to New York?
I think this ends up being a really good trade. Now, before I get into like a little bit more of the details of exactly what went down, I'm really happy about this trade for Caris LeVert individually. And here's why. Because when you think about it, all trades obviously have to go through a physical. We all know about that. And all of a sudden you hear something as LeVert's part of this trade. Something's going on with it. I think it's his left kidney. And if you really think about it, if it wasn't for this trade, I don't know if we know about that this year. And he could have been playing through that. So I'm like really happy from that standpoint that we found out about that. So now he knows and hopefully he can get better. And obviously he's going to recover, because if the medical staff said otherwise, this trade would have never been completed if they said otherwise. But now you're looking for more in-depth of who was in the – Houston got 4 first-round picks, 4 swap picks as well. That crazy amount of picks. Jared Allen was going to Cleveland. Taurean Prince is in Cleveland. I think it's a good trade. We all know about Harden and KD, how they work together. They will be fine, that duo. But when you add Kyrie to the mix, now these are 3 iso ball players. Kyrie with his actions, that's the one thing I'm a little bit concerned about. It's just his actions. If they can just focus on the game of basketball together, they will 100% be coming out of the East. No questions about it. If they can just focus on the game of basketball, their talents, you can't question any of their talents. But if you bring in the outside noise, distractions to the team, who knows? I don't know how it's going to work out. But these are just ifs. But if you stay away from the outside noise, it should work out.
I was kind of surprised by the trade. And then in the offseason, lots of people talked about Harden potentially going to the Nets. There was also, rumors possibly the Celtics or the Heat. And, he has that press conference with the Rockets after the game. And the next day he gets traded. I think this will benefit the Nets. They did trade a lot of picks. And Chris LeVert, you mentioned, him. This trade, it kind of turned it, and it's something more in the sports. Like, LeVert is something could seriously be wrong in this trade. Hopefully it's all right and everything with its physical and stuff. But as a player with LeVert, to me, that's he's really underrated. He played really well in the bubble this year for the Nets. And I don't follow the NBA a whole lot, but I picked LeVert to win, one of the top, most improved player, 6th man of the year. I think he'll be really, really good. And, with Harden, I think he'll be a nice addition to the Nets. And you mentioned Durant, Harden and Durant have already been playing a couple games. They have a couple wins so far. But, Kyrie's playing against the Cavs tomorrow. Looking forward to that one. But Kyrie's that player like you mentioned. To me, if it was Harden Durant, I would feel much more comfortable if I was the Nets coming out of the East. But you bring Kyrie into that, that's where it gets kind of interesting. Because, you have Harden. Harden did not win with Westbrook. He didn't win with CP3. I know they had a 3-2 lead against the Warriors, and CP3 got hurt, but they still blew the lead. He didn't win with Dwight Howard. It seems like lots of people forget about him and Howard played together. Kyrie goes to Boston, absolutely horrible. Kyrie, Tatum, Brown. I'm a fan of the Cavs and the Celtics. I don't follow them a ton, but I like them. I was really excited. Kyrie went to the Celtics. Thought that'd be really good. And, he's you thought they'd go to the finals and they never went to the finals. You thought they could possibly win it. Kyrie's not won anything since he's left LeBron. Like I said, Harden's not won nothing. Durant's coming off an injury from that last season, but he's playing extremely well. I'm excited to watch the Nets, but I think them coming out of the East is a lot closer than people think because Kyrie. That's my main issue. Also, it seems like they don't have any bench players who are really good. Jared Allen, like you mentioned, that's a really nice big man the Cavs got in that trade. He's averaged, I believe it was a double-double last year for the Nets. And, it'll be really interesting. As of right now, I'm kind of going to go bold here. I don't think the Nets will be in the finals. I know it sounds crazy, but I don't really trust Kyrie because ever since him leaving LeBron and the Cavs, he's shown nothing that he can win and can win with top stars. He's not done that with Tatum, a young guy, and I'm not sure if he'll be able to do it with players like Durant and James Harden.
That's interesting, and I definitely understand where you're coming from too. And this is just all a wait and see type scenario. That's all it is. And like when Kyrie makes the start, when he comes back to the team tomorrow against the Cavs, that's just the start of something that they have to build upon. And here's the thing too. Just imagine this, Jordan. You're throwing your first time head coach in Steve Nash in a championship or bust type scenario already. And in one of the toughest markets in sports. I don't know what Steve Nash does. I mean, how does he handle all of these guys together? It's going to be really interesting to see how this all plays out for sure.
And, to me, this kind of reminds me of the Lakers years ago when they had Kobe, Steve Nash, and Dwight Howard. 3 different personalities. Nash is like that quiet guy. Howard, he's good, but he was, just came off the Magic. It was at that time still a top 10 player. Obviously Kobe's Kobe, and Nash has kind of been in a similar situation before. And the Lakers started off that season really bad. I believe it was 2-5 or something like that. In the first 6 or 7 games, they already got their coach fired. I'm really excited. And if they don't make it out of the East, I'm sure there'll already be people talking about should Nash be fired, which to me, I think that's ridiculous. You can't fire somebody after 1 year. And especially with such a big trade, different personalities of those 3 stars. And it'll be really interesting to see. I'm really looking forward to it. And, with Harden being traded, somebody else, Victor Oladipo, him being traded, I think that's a really not nice addition. He's one of the more underrated players. And, it seems like there's multiple players in this trade that people aren't really talking about because they're just being overshadowed by Harden. But, it seems like the Cavs, I really like that Allen trade for the Cavs. The Rockets got a ton of draft capital and stuff. But I'm really excited for it and for the Nets and how the NBA goes out this season. Talking about trades and stuff, different teams. You are a fan of the Knicks, correct?
Yeah.
So is there any trade ideas you like for maybe the Knicks or just any NBA teams in general?
I would like the Knicks go after like a Bradley Beal. We don't know what's going on in Washington. It seems like just things aren't playing out there, especially ever since Russell Westbrook got there too. And now I just wonder what exactly they're going to ask for. Now they saw what James Harden, what Houston got in return there. I'm sure Washington is going to ask for something similar. Not the 4 first-round picks, but maybe about 3 they're going to try to get for Bradley Beal, I could see. Plus a little bit more as well. And that's like that's another 3-team trade I could see happening. If you would go for Bradley Beal, I would love the Knicks to get him. I think we need another point guard outside of Emmanuel quickly. I look at maybe a guy from like DeJounte Murray from San Antonio. I look at maybe a young guy, a backup for Damian Lillard, maybe Anthony Simmons. I don't know if they trade him, but those are maybe a Terry Rozier from Charlotte. Those are just a few guys that I would like to see the Knicks go after.
Rozier, he's been really nice for Charlotte this year. He has had a couple of really, really good games. I think that would be a really nice trade for New York. To me, there's a couple that come to mind, and one kind of includes it could include New York. You mentioned Bradley Beal. I really like Bradley Beal at the Celtics, and I think if you trade a couple first-round picks, if you would decide to trade Smart, you would have him in there. If you trade for Bradley Beal, you have to have Kemba Walker in there. That's a absolute must. I don't really follow the contrast a whole lot, but Kemba Walker, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. and Bradley Beal, that I mean, you would have no money at all. Let's
You're
say
right.
you trade Kemba Walker to the Knicks. You trade a couple first round picks to the Wizards and Smart or something. Or if the Celtics would decide to trade a couple first round picks and the Knicks would decide to throw in a couple first round picks too. The Knicks would get their really nice point guard, top 10 point guard in Kemba Walker. The Celtics would get Bradley Beal and would really make them a not possible candidate to be in the finals and possibly win it. And then the Wizards, obviously they're a rebuilding team that would have tons of draft capital. I mean, they could potentially have three or four first round picks,
Yep.
possibly if it were to happen just in this upcoming NBA draft.
That's actually a really great proposal. I like that a lot.
Another one I also like is I'm not trying to be biased here with the Celtics, but for years, I mean, they've needed that star big guy. I know they had Al Horford, and I mentioned Kyrie Irving. He wasn't what Boston thought he would be. It was also kind of Horford too. You thought he'd be a lot better. I really like Andre Drummond to the Celtics. I think that makes a ton of sense. That won't really cost them much in the contracts because Drummond's a free agent at the end of the season. And to me, I think the Cavs are a little bit better than people think. They have some nice guys like Sexton and Garland. But if you were to trade maybe 2 first-round picks or something for Drummond, I think the Cavs are possibly jumping that. And there's talks about him, maybe staying with Cleveland. But if you're the Celtics, I mean, if you have Brown, Tatum, if Kemba Walker can stay healthy, that's kind of a big if. And Andre Drummond, I mean, you got somebody at pretty much every single position. And one other one I like is Kevin Love to the Clippers. I really don't know much about the contracts with the Clippers right now. Obviously, I know they have George and Kawhi Leonard, but Love played at UCLA. He actually still has a house in Los Angeles, and they really disappointed some people last season in the playoffs. And Love's not what it used to be, but he can be another side piece, kind of like that their third best player, that another star player who can maybe step up in games if George is having a slump or Kawhi Leonard's having a slump as well, and give the Lakers more trouble. I would still probably expect the Lakers to win, but I think it would be more intriguing. But I really like Love possible to the Clippers and Drummond to the Celtics as well.
Yeah, and you bring up really good points here because, yeah, Cavs got off to a decent start, but the main question is, can they sustain this throughout the season? That's a huge if right now. And as of right now, I don't think they will just because of their young group. But anything can happen, of course. But I just think that they won't sustain it. And by the time the trade deadline rolls around in March, I think they end up shipping off veteran pieces like that. And they're better off doing that for their future, Cleveland. So, yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Also, I think that Jared Allen trade could be really beneficial because if you dump off Drummond and Love, you're saving money. And if you want, you could just sign Jared Allen. Like I mentioned, he averaged a double-double last season. He's less injury-prone than Love. The past couple of years, Love has been very injury-prone. And he would be more than likely be cheaper than re-signing Andre Drummond. So it'd be really interesting what the Cavs do in the NBA trade deadline, coming up, and also just NBA trades in general. So there's lots of trades. There's lots of moves. Speaking of moves, kind of switching sports over to baseball. On this show, we don't really talk about baseball like hardly at all. I'm going to try to be talking about it more. I really don't know a whole ton about it. You being a Yankees fan, what are your thoughts on the Yankees signing Corey Kluber?
Ooh, that was a really, really good deal, in my opinion. It was a 1-year deal worth $11 million. And there was actually a lot of other teams interested in Kluber at his showcase. I'm going back to now. This is former MLB closer Steve Cishek, and what he had to say basically was that he looked like his stuff is spot on all over again. And I think the Yankees got a steal because there was other teams in on him that were willing to give him a little bit more money than $11 million for a 1-year deal, and he decided to go with the Yankees, where pitching coach Matt Blake was actually used to be in Cleveland, so they had ties back over there. So I think that's one of the true reasons why Kluber became a Yankee. I like this deal a lot because a 1-year deal, it can't really hurt you if you really think about it. It's like if he ends up pitching poorly, okay, you don't bring him back. It is what it is. then you have to next man up. That's what the mentality you got to have. But then if it does work out, oh, great. Then you got a solid number 2 to go alongside Cole for a deep run in the postseason, hopefully. So I think this is an under radar type signing where, hey, let's definitely take the gamble here. We got nothing to lose.
Like I said, I really don't follow baseball much. I follow the Reds a little bit, but that's really about it. And I've also heard, the Yankees could possibly be looking at Luis Castillo, the pitcher of the Reds, as well. But, I really love the sign. Corey Kluber is a former Cy Young winner. And the fact that they got him so cheap, 2018, he won 20 games. Like, He's not somebody who's, towards the end of his career, he's still, really capable of having a 15, 21 season. He's not going to get you like 30, tons of wins, but he's still somebody like that's a great signing. Like that's an A+ pick signing to me. I mean, just with Garrett Cole, and they get somebody else. I mean, obviously you have Judge and Stanton. I know the Yankees haven't been in the World Series in a long time, but if they get maybe a little bit more pieces, I think they could really possibly in it. They also re-signed DJ LeMahieu, and I absolutely love that signing. I believe it was 6 years, $90 million. That was insane. I know he's old right now. He's 32 years old. By the end of this contract, he'll be over 37 years old. But he batted over 350 last year. He batted over 300 the year prior to the Yankees. So his 2 years with New York, both years he batted over 300. And for his career, he's batted over 300. He's a 3-time All-Star and a 3-time Gold Glove. 15 a year for somebody who's, bat 300 the past couple of years. I know, like, towards the end of his contract, it might not be great if, he's getting older. But, like, you're playing for right now. You're not playing in 4 or 5 years, especially with, all the guys the Yankees are signing and trading. That is a amazing move to me. I know some people may criticize it for his how old he'll be towards the end of the contract. But to me, like, that is that's an A+ signing to me.
He could, and to be honest with you, he could have got more money than that. I think he definitely could have done a lot better on the market. And both sides actually gave in when you really think about this. Brian Cashman was looking to go at that range what he ended up giving him. Then you have DJ LeMahieu, who originally wanted a 5-year deal worth 100 plus. Like, I think it was $110 million, somewhere around that. That's what he wanted. So LeMahieu really gave in just because the fact that, hey, I want to be a Yankee, and basically he was saying, let's not fight anymore. Let's get this done. And so there you go. Really, I mean, he's the best Yankee player for the past 2 years. He's the best Yankee player. Most consistent. He's a contact hitter. I mean, he hits for average. That's the best part about this guy. He hits for average. He's not hitting for the seats like Aaron Judge, Stan, and all Luke Voigt. They all do that. He's not that type of guy. He hits for average just to get his rear end on base, and that's what you need in this lineup to balance that out. And that's why the Yankees choked in recent years in the postseason, just because of the fact that they have too many guys who swing for the seats, and that's not going to help you in the playoffs.
I mean, that, like you mentioned, I mean, that's exactly why I love it so much. I mean, he's a hitter. He's not like you said, he's not a home run hitter. I would much rather have somebody who's a hitter than somebody whose average might be 250 and who's a home run hitter who might get, let's say, like 30, 35 home runs. I would much rather have that hitter, somebody like, Ichiro. I mean, I know he's not playing anymore. I'd rather have somebody like him than somebody like Stanton or, someone Judge, because, I mean, Ichiro, I mean, literally, he's going to get you a hit a game because his average is over 300. I mean, to me, I think hitters are much more beneficial to a team than home run hitters because, home run hitters, I mean, yeah, they might hit a home run, but they're not going to hit one every game. If you get a good hitter, they're going to get a hit literally just about every single game. And, I mean, like you said, I mean, I know the Yankees have some home run hitters in Stanton and Judge, but they get a top hitter like LeMahieu on such a really amazing contract. And really, I mean, this deal should not be this cheap. I thought it was an amazing move by the Yankees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Big time steal, and for a guy who just wanted to be a part of this team and win here, that's his ultimate goal.
So moving on to also New York, the Mets fired their GM today for posting sending inappropriate pictures to a sports colleague. And, I believe he was hired just last month or something like that.
Yeah.
He's kind of, he was newer to New York. They traded for who was it, for the Indians?
Lindor and Carrasco. They made that. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, since he's been the GM, they've made some really, really nice moves. People have been wanting to have the Mets make some moves. Recently, finally do that. Looking up for the Mets, and then he gets fired. Which, I mean, to me, he absolutely should be. I mean, there's no reason to do that. I mean, there's no really things that can come positive of that, especially if you're somebody in the sports world where, like today, there's more women in sports, and it's like this, I don't know, like speaking out type of deal, like, and everything. It's just really disappointing. And it's like he talked about culture and different things in his press conference, and it's like a month later you get fired for something as stupid as this. Like, that's very, very disappointing by him and the Mets there.
Yeah, and when you really look at it up to this point, you put your owner in no choice. Like, you have to make this move and fire the guy. And Steve Cohen, I mean, he didn't take long this morning. Like, this was happening early hours of the morning. Like, I felt like he probably woke up at 6, and then literally a couple hours later, he was like, this guy's gone. I'm firing him. I'm not messing around. You can't have that reputation in your front office. Because if let's just say you would have brought him back for some retarded reason, then all of a sudden, it's like you're basically rewarding this guy. Oh, good job. So here's your job back. And it's like, you can't do that. This was a no-brainer move. And for this guy, I mean, that's just the power of technology. That's how you got to sum it up, right? That's the power of social media. As soon as you send out something, even if you delete on your end, right? Guess what? That doesn't mean anything. That it's still out there. Everything's still on file. There's someone is always going to be able to get access to it. So just because you think that you delete it and, it's all over with, nope, someone's always going to find out. And look, perfect example right now. This happened in 2016, and now we're in 2021. That's just the power right there.
Very interesting to see who the Mets will hire as their GM. Is there? I mean, I honestly don't really know many candidates, but is there anybody who you maybe think the Mets should hire as their GM?
I forgot the guy's name, but I think it might be the runner-up. I have to look it up, but whoever the runner-up was, I think he might be getting the job.
I mean, like I said a couple of times in this episode, I really don't follow baseball much. Do you think it would be like possible or like realistic if they would hire, former Matt David Wright as their GM?
That's actually something I could see one day. It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I could see this guy in a big time role for the organization in the near future. I don't know if it's going to be this year, who knows when, but I could actually see it. It's going to be interesting to see if it's that specific role, but that's interesting. I like that, to be honest with you.
It'll be really interesting what the Mets do with their GM situation. And switching gears to football, obviously the NFL divisional round was this past week, and there's all those games, some great games, some last games for some players. So started off, the Packers defeated the Rams 32-18. Well, before we get started here, before the playoffs, who was your Super Bowl pick going into the playoffs?
Mine was Green Bay and Buffalo heading into the playoffs. And before the regular season even started, that was my very first Super Bowl pick. I had Kansas City and Seattle. I switched over a month before the postseason started. I went to Green Bay and Buffalo.
Before the season, I had the Saints and the Chiefs. I had the Saints winning. And a couple of weeks, I had the same thing. I had the Bills and the Packers. To me, they're easily, right now, not even close to two most complete teams of football. And, talking about the Packers here, they defeated the Rams 32-18 in their game this past week. I mean, like I said, I mean, proving that they're the best team in the NFC and probably the best team in the NFL right now. There's lots of talk about the Rams defense winning that game. Still scored over 30 points. Aaron Rodgers played like the MVP that he 100% should win. Nobody else is This is Rodgers, the MVP. I really don't know how anybody can say anybody else should win it.
You can't make
You
the case
know,
for anybody else. Can't make the case for anybody else this year.
I mean, it's exactly. I mean, this is his best season ever. And, they have like the big matchup going in the game was Devontae Adams and Ramsey. And, Ramsey, I mean, was just outplayed by Adams. The Rams defense was unable to stop Rodgers. I was very impressed with the Packers here. And despite them, me picking them, I was still kind of surprised they scored so many points against the Rams defense, who easily had the best defense in the playoffs up to that point, easily had the best defense, probably like scoring-wise. In the NFL this season. The Steelers had a really nice defense to start the year, but they went downhill. But the Rams have consistently had a really nice defense. I mean, they stopped, Tampa Bay and Monday Night Football earlier in the year. I was really, really impressed with the Packers in this game.
Yeah, I was too, and I thought it would have been a little bit closer, but going into Green Bay on the road. Now, this is the first time in Aaron Rodgers' history, you believe this, that he will be hosting an NFC championship game. That's crazy to think about now. And I mean, for the Rams defense, this is how my thought process was heading into the game. If the Rams defense can't play well enough, if they can't get enough stops against that terrific offense, I mean, they're going to be done early just because the fact that I don't see Jared Goff putting up 30-plus points on the road because that's what you have to do. And that's what Tampa Bay is going to have to do in order to take down Green Bay, is that Brady and that offense is going to have to put up 30-plus points in order to beat them. Because if you don't, you're losing that game because that's just how good Green Bay's offense is playing. And another thing to point out, I think this was in the first half, and you had Devontae Adams just deking out Jalen Ramsey on the line. And the ball spot, wherever it was, I think they were on their their own 10. On the Rams 10-yard line. And basically, you could tell Jalen Ramsey was yelling at his teammates like this, "Hey man, he has me beat. Someone else pick him up. He has me beat." And then all of a sudden, Rodgers gets the snap. He just tosses it to Adams on his right side for a touchdown. And you see Ramsey throwing a tantrum, and like everyone says, "Oh, why is he throwing a hissy fit?" It's because the fact that he knew that he couldn't keep up with Devontae in that specific play. He's yelling at his other teammates like, "Someone just pick him up. I can't keep up with them." He tried to warn them, but right there, that offense is just way too much. And I think Alan Lazard's another guy. He's another guy that you got to watch out for, like deep threats.
If they scored over 30 points against the Rams defense, I cannot imagine what they could do against a team in the playoffs who doesn't have as good of a defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, I mean, Adams, really outplayed Ramsey. And, going on, speaking of the Rams, the Rams head coach, Brandon Staley, was announced as the head coach of the Los Angeles Chargers. Any thoughts on that move?
When they hired Staley, I thought the Chargers initially were going to go the offensive side of the ball. I thought at first they were going to try to play that waiting game with Brian Dable, the OC from Buffalo. That's what I thought their idea. I thought that was their direction, but I guess they were just getting impatient and they're like, "All right, let's get our head coach now." It's going to be interesting to see how this guy is. I didn't even know he was a candidate for their job, and now all of a sudden he's their head coach, and it's just a wait and see type scenario. And hopefully they get the right OC for Justin Herbert. That's the main thing. You got to make sure you get an OC who's going to be always on the same page as that young quarterback, who I actually think is going to be in the MVP race next year, Justin Herbert.
I really, really, really hate this move. Like you mentioned, Daboll, that's the obvious choice. I mean, if lots of people, if the Bills lose in the AFC Championship game to the Chiefs, okay, so what? You have to wait 1 week. If you wait 1 week and get your guy, it's totally worth it. I mean, if you saw what Daboll did with Josh Allen, Josh Allen's rookie season, the Bills, I believe they're ranked 30th in scoring points per game. Now they're in the top 3. I mean, he's a huge part of Josh Allen's development. Coming out of college, Josh Allen was a big, big project player. He was a big question mark. Lots of people weren't so sure about him. And, Justin Herbert had one of the best seasons ever for a rookie quarterback in NFL history. And I thought the Chargers would really want Dayball because if they did did so well with Allen, who is a question mark, and you're not so sure, and really developed, I don't know why the Chargers would not want Dayball when his potential with Justin Herbert is literally unlimited. I mean, Josh Allen took him 3 years. Justin Herbert, I mean, you can make a case at times has played better than Josh Allen this year even. And I really don't understand. Something else to point out, the Chargers GM went to high school with Brian Daboll. I mean, I kind of there's connections from years and years ago to me that really don't make sense. I really thought Daboll was the guy before, and Anthony Lynn being fired, I thought Daboll would have been the guy from the very beginning. I really don't understand this.
Yep, I'm in the same position, and up to this point, it's just a wait and see game with the coach.
So going back to the NFL divisional recap, the Bills defeated the Ravens 17-3. What are your thoughts on that game?
Now, this game, before, I was really interested to see what we were going to get exactly, whether it was going to be a high-powered offense between Lamar and Josh Allen, or was it going to be a more defensive matchup? And obviously, we got the defense in this one. A lot of people were riding high. I'm sure that you know about this, Jordan. As soon as Lamar Jackson got his first playoff win on the road at Tennessee, a lot of people were starting to hop on his shoulder and be like, "Oh, this guy might make a deep run." But I was like, "Not." I'm like, they just don't have. Here's the thing with Baltimore: people forget that they are not a complete offense. They don't have enough playmakers, and if you don't have enough supporting cast, and you expect to make a deep run in the postseason, I mean, there's so many teams that are just going to outmatch you in so many different categories. You see it with Buffalo. They have an actual supporting cast for Allen. You see it with KC. I mean, if they went up against those two teams, they're screwed. They can't compete on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, yes, they're there defensively. But you just need more offensively, and you can't have Lamar consistently playing quarterback position and always being your RB. It feels like he's always being their running back. And they just released Mark Ingram. They saved $5 million doing that, but I mean, they got to bring someone else in. They just got to make moves with their receiving core. They got to do something.
I'm going to go ahead and say it. Lamar Jackson's never going to win a Super Bowl. He can only do so much. He can run the ball. He's an inconsistent passer. I know people say, well, don't call him a running back. Well, you just hate on him because, he wins or is good. He can run, but to say he elevates a team, to me, I think would be a ridiculous statement to say. You mentioned their defense. The only reason they were even over 500 this season was because of their defense. Lamar Jackson is a runner. He's a strict runner. He's an athlete. He's not a quarterback. He's an athlete. I know some people might get aggravated. He wins games. He's won a playoff game. Okay, but he won a game with his legs, and they really should have lost that game. They won a one-possession game against the Titans where they held Derrick Henry for 18 attempts for 40 yards. You held Henry to 2.2 yards per carry, and you still nearly lost to them. And I hate the fact, Jackson, he finally won his playoff game. You were never, ESPN, NFL Network, all those people were never talking about, Jackson not winning a playoff game until after he won one. If they would have lost, I know it sounds crazy, but would people say, with Lamar Jackson, is he the guy for Baltimore? Because honestly, I'm a Bengal fan, and after 2 years, people are already saying, after 2 playoff losses, should the Bengals get rid of Andy Dalton? I'm not comparing Lamar Jackson to Andy Dalton. I'm strictly saying, the roles were very, very similar, and the reactions for people were very, very different. Jackson to me will never win a Super Bowl. He won that game, yes, but he played really, really bad. Take away that one big rushing attempt he had for a touchdown. He really didn't play nearly as good as people expected. Thought he talked about he did. He had that one horrible pass, I believe it was to Hollywood Brown. Really, it could have been a completion with 40 or 50 yards, wide left, and it was an interception. And you mentioned they released Mark Ingram. They saved some money. But to me, you can get you mentioned weapons, but to me, you can get the best receiver in the world for Lamar Jackson, but that's not going to change the Ravens. You could put Devontae Adams on the Ravens. I still don't think it. I mean, obviously it helps the Ravens offense, but they're still going to be a run happy team. They're always going to be because that's the way Jackson is in his offense. You can't for the Ravens. If they're up 10, you're going to lose. If they're down 10, they're not going to win because their offense is kind of like Army and Navy. I mean, football. I mean, you run the ball, run the ball, run the ball, and if you're down, you're going to lose. It's way that whole game. And I hate. I'm not trying to be like anti-biased because I'm a Bengal fan. I just don't understand the hype with Lamar Jackson. I mean, last season he had an incredible season, but to me, people are starting to finally figure out Jackson and realize that he's a one-dimensional quarterback. And to me, this game really proves that Jackson is not the player that people think he is.
Mm-hmm. And you bring up great points here. And to be honest, when you look at just his game and in a run-heavy offense, how do you expect to be successful in the playoffs where you're playing in a league where it's pass-heavy? You have a lot of QBs who can launch that ball down the field. You see it right now in their own conference. In their own conference, they have it. You see it in Josh Allen. You see it in Mahomes. You're seeing it in Watson as soon as they complete a team. Whatever happens with that Watson situation, if he ends up staying there, you always include Watson in that conversation. So it's just, to me, they have to do something. Like you said, yes, you can add a number one wide receiver, but they have to kind of flip the playbook where you're going to pass more. Like Lamar has to realize if he gets a number one receiver, you can't be running as much, man. You just can't be doing that. And if you still expect to get a number one receiver and you're still a run-heavy team, how do you expect to be a successful offense? Like, I really want to know Coach John Harbaugh, how he feels about this. I want to know, he made that transition over. You have to remember who his quarterback was before Lamar Jackson. That was Joe Flacco. He won a Super Bowl with. And Joe Flacco couldn't run. I mean, now you go from a guy who passed the ball so many times to all of a sudden to a guy who all he does is run. I mean, I just want to know. That's someone I would love to talk to and just like understand how his playbook has changed. It completely changed throughout his coaching career.
I think a lot of the playbook has to, change because of Jackson's limitations. In a way, I think that the Ravens know that, Jackson's not going to win if he passes the ball, and I think the Ravens coaching staff know that. I think if they win, it's going to be because Lamar Jackson, the athlete, not the passer. And you made a point, talking about, and it's hard to win today's NFL. Running when it's pass heavy. Look at the 4 teams remaining. Josh Allen's an MVP candidate. Patrick Mahomes has won an MVP, a top 2 quarterback. Aaron Rodgers is the MVP this year, first ballot Hall of Famer. Tom Brady's arguably the greatest quarterback of all time. This is a quarterback league. Nothing else. Like, you're not going to win. Like, you may win some games running, but there's a big limit to it. And the reason they've won so many games, people don't talk about it enough. It's strictly because their defense. Early in the year, the Bengals played the Ravens, and that's when the Bengals have been bad pretty much the whole year. But to begin the season, that's when they were, the worst. And they held Lamar Jackson to 3 rushing yards. People didn't talk about it because, the Ravens held the Bengals to just 3 points. They're not talking about Jackson's flaws because they're winning. Imagine Deshaun Watson on one of those teams. I mean, Deshaun Watson, he's a top 5 quarterback. Some people won't say he's a top 5 quarterback strictly because he doesn't win. And that's why people say Jackson is a great quarterback is because they win. If they don't win, people say, well, he's not as good. It's because he's not as good. He gets carried by his defense, and I think people really need to start talking about it more. And we were talking about quarterbacks and different games. The Chiefs and Browns game. That game was absolutely crazy. The Chiefs were able to pull out the win, 22-17. And to me, before Mahomes got hurt, this game proved to me the Chiefs are nearly as good as people thought. I mean, I don't think they're as good as people think they are. And I know you said that you had the Bills in the Super Bowl prediction. I do as well. And, at one point in the season, the Chiefs had 7 straight wins. All of those games were by one possession. That's the NFL record. The most games but winning by one possession in NFL history. That they should have lost some more games. They've barely came out with a couple of games like the Falcons. Nearly got swept by the Raiders. Have lost some teams. Nearly lost to teams who aren't good. And, they were really close against the Browns. And, before, Mahomes got hurt, it was a really close game. But to me, this really proved another thing. I think this really proved the Browns are for real. It's not really fun to say that being a Bengal fan, but I know lots of people say, well, the Browns, laughing they lost. They went to the divisional round, won a playoff game against the Steelers, nearly beat the Chiefs, who are defending champs. I know Mahomes was hurt, but when Mahomes was playing, it was the score was a lot closer. The game was a lot closer than the score indicated. To me, first-year head coach and Kevin Stefanski, you can make a case he should win Coach of the Year. I think the future is really bright for Cleveland. But to me, this game really just proved, that the Chiefs are not as good as people think, and they are 100% beatable.
Yeah, they definitely are beatable for sure. And how I look at this with the Browns for the future is that this is what you need in the NFL is a number one, number two, 1-2 punch in your backfield. And that's what they come. They come at you with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And Kansas City, heading into the game, we all know about their run-stopping defense. They're not the best. And they ended up playing up much better than I thought they would. I expected that backfield to have more of a day. I expected both sides to score more points. I thought it would have been a much higher scoring affair. But now, going to when Mahomes got taken out, and right away, I had that feeling. I'm like this, okay, 35-year-old Chad Henne's coming into the game. And I'm like, Cleveland, this is your shot now to shock the world. And all of a sudden, you allow him to have this run on you like he's Pat Mahomes running himself. And I'm like, man, how did you let a 35-year-old quarterback just run on you like that? I forgot the exact yardage, but he had a decent run. And I was like, man, you had your shot against them. And this is a game Cleveland, they're going to look back on and say that they should have won this game. But at the end of the day, they're back in the postseason next year. I 100% believe that. They're back there next year. They have a great coaching staff. We know what they bring to the table now. And like you said, in all likelihood, Kevin Stefanski is going to win Coach of the Year. And, this is their first time they were in the playoffs since, 2002, right? This was the first time they were in there. And they haven't got a playoff win since, I think you got to go back to when Bill Belichick was the head coach over there. So it's been a really long time, and it's great for the city. Yes, I'm sure they're upset about that they lost inside the second half to Chad Henne, but there's a great future in store. Baker Mayfield is improving as a quarterback. That's the key. That's what I needed to see, is composure from him, and I did see that from him. So they have a good future.
You mentioned the Browns being in the postseason next year. They're going to be in the postseason next year because they're going to win a division. I know that might be a little bit bold, but I really expect the Browns to win the division next year. You look at the Bengals; they're gonna improve. I think it'll be 7-9 type of season like that. The Steelers, they're going to drop back. They're going to be. I don't think they're going to be really good. The Ravens, their defense, I don't think will be as good. Like we said, talked about Jackson's limitations. It'll be really interesting to see with the Browns. I think, you're looking at teams, they can sign some of their top guys like Mayfield and Chubb because they have contracts expiring in the next year or two. They could be one of the best teams in the NFL for the next couple of years. And I know, most of my listeners are Bengal fans, and they're not going to like hearing that, but it's 100% the truth. The Browns have a great future. And, talking about quarterbacks and different things, great quarterbacks, great games. The other game was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking the Saints. The Saints won 30-20. To me, this game is kind of depressing to watch. And I know Brady. I know Brady's stats might have looked better if you did not watch the game, you thought Brady would have played well. But if you watched the game, Brady did not really play that good. All his passes were 5 yards and all that stuff. Same thing with Breeze. And to me, it was really depressing because you say, like, 10 years ago, you watching these two quarterbacks. They're the best two quarterbacks in the league. And it's like now, like, you're grown up, you're older. This is Breeze's last game. He can barely throw more than 10 yards. Brady can barely throw more than 15 yards. I picked the Saints, but I'm not surprised the Buccaneers won. It's hard to beat a team twice. It's nearly impossible to beat a team 3 times, especially when you have arguably the best quarterback of all time. I was really impressed with the Buccaneers, but this was just it was really upsetting to see Breeze go out the way he did. I would have liked to see them win a Super Bowl for him. It's not easy, but it's a lot easier to win one Super Bowl than it is two. You look at Joe Flacco. You mentioned he won a Super Bowl, but you look at Drew Brees. Aaron Rodgers. Some of those quarterbacks, they've never won two. And if Brees would have won two, you can make a better case to say that he would be better than Manning or Brady or somebody like that. But to me, it was kind of upsetting to watch the game, knowing that this was Brees' last game, and just they were unable to win, and just how bad he played in this game.
Yeah, and another thing to pinpoint before I get to Drew Brees is you believe that Michael Thomas didn't have one single reception yard in that game. I mean, that says something. And I mean, the Saints got to really, really focus in on how this offense is going to improve. I mean, how does your star receiver not have one single reception yard? That's really disappointing. I know New Orleans, Brees had 3 interceptions. The team had a total of 4 turnovers throughout the games, and Tampa had 0. Brady took over. He just took care of the football. And pretty much the last time a team actually beat somebody 3 times in the same year, you got to go back to 2009. Dallas did that to Philadelphia. So it can be done, but it hasn't been done in some time. Brady, and here's the thing, when Brady was, and that I remember New Orleans was the favorite in that game, the slight favorite in that game. And if you have Brady as an underdog, that is a mistake. That's a mistake in a playoff game if you have Brady as an underdog. I don't care if it's even slightly. You can't do that to him. You really can't. But it's, like you said, it was depressing because you saw on the sideline with like about a minute in the fourth quarter, I believe, Drew Brees is just tapping Jameis Winston. And he's like, this is your team now. You're taking over. And I was like, oh, my God. It was just so sad to see that. Obviously, the battle of 2 future Hall of Famers, but that just goes to the more successful quarterback throughout his career, and that was Brady.
It was like I said, very, it was hyped up. Last time they played each other, then you watch the game. It's just really upsetting. You talked about Winston. Kind of goes to our next topic here. What do you think the New Orleans Saints should do with their future quarterback situation? Jameis Winston's a free agent at the end of the season. Taysom Hill has 1 contract left, and it's, I believe, $16 million. So, what do you think New Orleans should do with their quarterback situation?
I think they bring back Jameis Winston. They work something out, and I also think the Saints need to draft their own QB as well. I'm looking at maybe like a Kyle Trask from Florida, from if they could get him in the late first round, maybe in the early second. But I think they need to draft their own guy. And I don't think Taysom Hill is their quarterback. I think he's best known for his versatility, what he brings to that offense, versatility-wise. For him to be a starting quarterback, I think Hill is, 32 now? I don't know about him being the quarterback moving forward, but just give the job, let a rookie battle it out with Jameis Winston and see what you can do from there.
I think it has to be Winston. I mean, you can, draft a quarterback maybe the first or second round, maybe Matt Jones, Kyle Trask, one of those 2 guys has to be Winston. I mean, everybody's, Sean Payton's an offensive guru, and he's done so much with Drew Brees throughout the years. And to me, Winston gets a lot of hate for last year. I know we threw lots of interceptions, but you got to look at the positive side. And over 30 passing touchdowns, over 5,000 passing yards in his first year with a new head coach and a new offensive coordinator. I was talking to somebody the other day. I think we're going to look back 5, 10 years ago, 5, 10 years from now. That's going to be one of the most like underrated seasons in NFL history for a quarterback. And I know I sound crazy because I know he threw for 30 interceptions, but he did it a lot better than people thought he did. And I think he could be really, really nice for Tampa Bay. I think he should be the starter next year. Maybe add a couple more weapons around him because, Breeze, great quarterbacks can elevate talent. Winston isn't a great quarterback. I think he's good. He's a little bit above average. But if you bring in some more wide receivers, maybe draft one in the second round, I think that would be a good idea. And you mentioned Trask or Jones. I would like that, but to me, I think New Orleans should really re-sign Jameis Winston and him be their future starting quarterback.
Yeah, and you mentioned Winston. You're going back to the season with the Bucs where he had that. Obviously, everyone talks about the interceptions. That's the first thing they're going to bring up. And you got to remember this too. All those interceptions, they weren't on him. Not all of them were on him. You just take a look back. If you watch some film, some of his highlights, I would say probably about maybe 10 to 12, maybe a little more than that. Actually has something to do with his receivers, just not simply catching the ball. Or you can tell that they didn't run their route properly. So for somebody just to lose their mind about Winston's performance that year and say, well, he had whatever the amount was, 30 plus interceptions. I mean, he's not good. It's like just take a look back at the film and you'll see how some of them weren't his fault.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what the Saints do with their future quarterback situation. Drew Brees retiring, and greatest quarterbacks of all time. You talk about Brees, you talk about Tom Brady, you talk about Peyton Manning. Talking and switching gears of college football just for a moment. Then we'll talk about the AFC and NFC championship games. Peyton Manning's alma mater, fired Jeremy Pruitt today, Tennessee head coach of their football team. What are your thoughts on them firing Pruitt?
Now, Tennessee hasn't been going upwards as a program of late. They just haven't been. And there's more to it with the recruiting. I mean, there's been a report of them offering their recruits cash in McDonald's bags. And, I mean, what does that tell you about that conference at SEC? That they are doing anything they can just to get recruits to be competitive. And that happens more than you think. That happens more often just because of the fact this is a legal process. These college athletes, they can't get paid. And they'll do anything to get these 4-star guys. If they can steal guys from Alabama, something like that, I mean, they're definitely going to do that. And I don't even know how it came out exactly, but I'm sure this is something that the program needs to fix for sure, and just find a new head coach where you won't find a situation like this ever again.
Yeah, that's really a weird, way to get fired. He's not really done well with Tennessee. They've not really been really consistent for a while. And to me, head coaching, why not bring in Peyton Manning? I know it's not going to happen, obviously, but at least try. To me, he's a really offensive guru. Imagine recruits. Like you mentioned, you're paying recruits you're putting freaking money in McDonald's bags. You're not going to have to be paying money to be getting coached by one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I mean, I think Tennessee should hire Manning as their head coach. Will it happen? Probably absolutely not. But I think that'll be a really, really smart move by the Volunteers if they do it.
Oh my goodness. Could you imagine what that fan base would be feeling like if they're like Peyton Manning's there? Oh my goodness. I mean, who wouldn't want to play for him? There'll be recruits, no matter what position you play, you'll be lining up to play for that guy. So it's definitely a long shot, but hey, we've been through this in sports before. Anything could happen. It could literally start from zero and work its way up as a chance. So you just don't know.
Imagine Peyton Manning coaching against Nick Saban. That would be just absolutely crazy.
Oh my God.
Saban's the best coach of all time. Manning's a top 2 quarterback of all time. And then that would be insane. The watch, that would be absolutely crazy. So, going back to the championship games this week, we're just talking about Tennessee for a moment here. Um, the Bills are playing the Chiefs. We both have the Bills in our Super Bowl predictions before the playoffs started. Who do you have in this one? Are you going to stick with your Bills pick here?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with my Bills pick here, regardless of the situation with Mahomes, because he's in still that concussion protocol. And regardless of that situation, I still think he plays. Mahomes is going to do everything in his power to make sure that his rear end's on that field and playing in this game. So whatever the situation is, I'm still taking Buffalo. But this team needs to establish a running game against a defense where they're not the best against the run. You have to establish that in this game. I think they get Zach Moss back. I think they do. They're trying their best to make that happen. I think he's on track. Singletary he actually looked promising in the second half against Baltimore. So if you can get him involved consistently in this game, will be absolutely huge. And that might seal the deal for Buffalo. If they can establish a running game consistently, that might give them the win because their defense, I like their defense a lot. And I think they could give Mahomes some problems throughout the game.
I really like Buffalo too. I picked them going before the playoff started, like you did as well. You look at the games they've won. I believe I think it's like 11 out of 12 or something like that, or 10 of 11. They've won those games, and that one game they lost was the Hail Mary against the Arizona Cardinals. Hail Marys don't happen. I mean, I don't even know the odds of one of those plays happening. I mean, really, they should have those, whatever it was, 12 straight wins, 11 straight wins. They're the most complete team in the AFC right now. I really don't think that's close. I know that sounds crazy because the Chiefs are the defending champs during the AFC Championship game. But like I mentioned earlier, the Chiefs are playing two many close games. I posted a video a couple of weeks ago. I forgot what the stat was, but I did the Hot Take Tuesday episode. I do like hot takes on Tuesday occasionally. I said the Chiefs won't be in the Super Bowl, and it was something crazy. I believe it was like the last 8 games of the regular season, might have been 6. The Bills were outscoring teams 37-22, while the Chiefs were only outscoring teams by 3 points a game. Perfect example. Go back to the Chiefs game when they played the Dolphins. They had to use their final possession to win. It was just a kneel down, but they won by 1 possession. The Bills put up over 50 points against the Dolphins. They took Allen out in the third quarter, and Matt Barkley was even scoring against the Miami defense. You look at the teams they played against each other, they're completely different. The Bills are playing amazing football right now. They were able to stop the run, even when, Jackson was in the game, which, even though we talked about Jackson, it's still very difficult to stop the run, the Baltimore run. And, we talked about the Chiefs barely able getting by against Cleveland. I have the Bills in this one.
Yep, and I think their defense definitely from their meeting in the regular season. You saw rookie Clyde Edwards have a little bit of a field day against that defense. I think Buffalo's defense shapes up, and they know what to expect from that offense. So I think we definitely see a different result in this one.
Yeah, it'll be a great game. And, speaking of the NFC Championship game, cannot wait for this one. Everybody talks about Breeze and Brady. Brady and Rodgers in this one. You can make a case Rodgers is better than Breeze. I don't think that's out of the hand. You can also make a case that Rodgers is better than Brady. That might be a little bold, but you look at talent-wise, I think it's a lot more comparable. Brady has so many Super Bowls. I know Rodgers only has 1, but what Rodgers has done throughout his career with far less weapons, not nearly as good of a head coach. I mean, he had Mike McCarthy the majority of his career with Green Bay. I mean, Brady had Belichick. I mean, it's just really, really excited for this one. I think Tampa Bay, though, I think part of the reason I did so well was because they knew Drew Brees' tendencies. They knew he was going to throw a 5-yard slant to Michael Thomas. And like you mentioned, Thomas not even have a catch in that game. I mean, playing them twice, it's really beneficial at times to play divisional teams in the playoffs because you've already seen them and you've already played them twice. And I think, they knew what the New Orleans Saints game plan was going in that game. I think that had part of why they were doing so good in that game. But you look at Green Bay, like we talked about, over 30 points against the Rams defense. Rams defense is the best defense in the NFL. Rodgers is the MVP. If Devontae Adams was over 60 yards and believe 9 catchers or something like that and a touchdown against Ramsey, he's going to have at least 100 this game. And to me, I would say the Packers in this one. I would say by 2 possessions. I think the Bills and Ravens game will be the close one of the two. I think that one could be 1 possession for the Bills win. But this one, I think it'll be probably about a 10-point victory for the Packers. And I know obviously with the coronavirus, you're not allowed to have full capacity in NFL stadiums. But with this being in being in Green Bay, the limit of the fans, that's going to be really, really beneficial to Green Bay. So I'll take the Packers in this one over the Buccaneers.
Yeah, and you mentioned earlier when you're talking about the little debate that you can have between Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when you look at overall talent, who's better? It's definitely Aaron Rodgers. I would take him every single day of the week. But the reason why, and you definitely know this too, Jordan, why Brady's the GOAT is compared with the championships. That's what it comes down to. When you look at the best quarterback, everyone's going to say it's Brady because the fact that he has 6 Super Bowl rings. That's why. And now, if you look at overall, imagine if let's just say Rodgers had 4. Brady had 6, Rodgers had 4. I think, to be honest with you, you make that case that Rodgers is better. Even regarding if it's that close to each other, Rodgers is definitely the better quarterback because of overall talent, overall skill level. That's why. But like I said, that's why Brady's the GOAT, because of his championships. He'll always have that over just about anybody. But now, in this game, you're going to have to score around 30 points, maybe in the late 20s, like 28, 30, maybe a little bit more than that. Depends what Green Bay's offense does. But I think you're going to have to, on the road, you're going to have to score 30-plus points because of the fact this offense is absolutely lethal. And it seems like they just can't be stopped. As soon as Rodgers gets that connection immediately with Adams throughout a game, I mean, it's hard to adjust as a defense. It really is. And Green Bay's offensive line is stepping the heck up. You want to talk about something that's not getting a lot of credit for, I think, is your offensive line missing how do you say his last name? David Bakhtiari?
Yeah.
Man, I mean, that's their best O-line. That's their best guy in the O-line. And he's out for the year. And they're stepping up, creating holes for Aaron Jones. Dylan, the rookie, stepping up. Jamal, who is it? Is it Jamal Williams, his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that 3 guys in their backfield as well. So they have plenty of options on that offense. And I think their defense as well has been playing well of late. And that's something that doesn't get credit for as well. I think it will be a close game too, but I could see Green Bay by a touchdown.
And you mentioned, Rodgers' overall talent better than Brady. And I kind of talked about earlier, it's really hard to win 1, but 2, that's where you can kind of make a case, they're top tier quarterbacks. And to me, if Rodgers were to beat Brady to go to the championship game and go on to win the Super Bowl, you can make a lot better case for Rodgers as the greatest of all time. I know he doesn't have nearly as many Super Bowls, and then he has 2 compared to 6, but I think you can make it's much more debatable because 1 to 6 is not really debatable because if you're debating that, you're basically debating Brady against Nick Foles. It's because he has 1. But to me, it'll be really interesting to see. Also, vice versa, talking about Brady with the Super Bowl. If he were to beat Rodgers, who is obviously the MVP this year, and whether it be Josh Allen, who's a top 3 MVP candidate, and Mahomes, who's also the other MVP candidate who's in the top 3, if he would beat Rodgers and that whoever they would play in the Super Bowl, be a 7th Super Bowl, more than every single team. You go from playing in the NFC, going to a new team, defeating Drew Brees, top 5 quarterback of all time, first ballot Hall of Famer, beating Aaron Rodgers, first ballot Hall of Famer, MVP season, one of the best talent-wise, top 5 quarterback of all time. And then you could possibly be Allen or Mahomes, who Mahomes keeps it up, would be a Hall of Famer, with a brand new division, a brand new conference. If the Buccaneers were to win this game and go on to win the Super Bowl, I'm not really a Brady fan, but there's no way you can debate it anymore. Like to me, if the Buccaneers win the Super Bowl this year, Brady's easily the greatest of all time.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with that 100%, Jordan. You hit it right on the head.
So, I mean, on this episode, we kind of talked about, some MLB moves, the James Harden trade, some NBA trade ideas, the Mets firing their GM, the NFL divisional round recap, the, Tennessee Volunteers firing their head coach, and the AFC and NFC championship games. So, that kind of about does it. So, can you tell some of the listeners if they can follow you on social media?
Yeah, so I have my own podcast, the SK Sports Podcast, as you can see down on the screen here. I'm on Instagram at Shawn_Kiernan. And there's a link in my bio for some interviews as well that goes to Anchor and Apple Podcasts and Spotify, stuff like that. That's more of like the radio type feel to it where I first started. But Jordan, thank you for having me, and I'm definitely looking forward to being on again soon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This has been a great episode. People who are watching, make sure to go follow Shawn. As you can see on the thing below, I will put the links of his social media accounts in the description. Make sure to go check him out. Thank you all so much for watching. If you can like this video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. And I will see you next time on the Sports 2 Hunt Show.